So I'm just continuing the shading on the face, just starting off very lightly and just seeing where the marks are going. So I put the mark down, and then as I'm drawing, I'm just making sure it's in the right place, if it needs to be adjusted or not. So I generally start off really lightly. So with the chin over here, I put it in and realized it was too small, so I had to move it down. And again, I just put it in and check to see whether everything's in the right place, whether it's working properly. And then on the lips, what I did was just add a little more darkness to get a bit of depth. So still it's not finished, I just put a little bit down and see how that looks. And then I do want to get a sense of three-dimensionality, so I do want to get the different tones from light to dark just to make sure that's working. And here on the cheek, what I've been doing, I'm just obviously following the contours of the face, so I'm drawing in a way that is like sculpting the face. So my pencil marks, well, it's actually charcoal, they're just moving in a circular pattern, sort of circular. So it's actually almost sculpting the cheek shape. And then I don't, the cheek is one thing, we know that, but generally, if you're doing shadows, you don't want to stop just because the cheek ends. So the shadow, I'm actually taking all the way up the forehead and then around the back of the skull. So this is when I put the hair in, it's not just stuck on top, it's actually going to come out of that shadow that I made. So I'm thinking, well, obviously the face is the focal point, but it's part of the skull, and so when I put the shadows on, it's all got to relate. It doesn't just stop, it's got to relate to everything all over the skull. I'm doing a little bit of cross-hatching, so there's marks that could go in various directions. If you go just in one direction, it tends to look a little obvious, and you tend to be too aware of the marks rather than what they're supposed to be doing. So if I do too many marks going at one angle, I lose sight of the fact that it is meant to be a shadow and it's also meant to be shaping the face. So I'm constantly crisscrossing my marks in this cross-hatching way to do that, to smooth out the one-directional marks, and also to make a softer look on the skin. If you cross-hatch, you tend to make your shading look a little smoother, a little softer. So again, I just started lightly and then just added layering of marks, cross-hatched marks, and just building up the darks slowly that way. And then just what I'm doing now, when I'm doing the nose, is thinking about, well, when I did the nose, it was thinking about how it belongs to the cheek. So it's not just the nose, it's the nose within the cheek. And then the ear, again, that's coming out of the cheek. I'm eventually going to put shade on it. I just want to make sure that it fits. It doesn't feel like it's too close, too far away. And that was also a reference. So the head is a reference for the ear to know where to put it in, and then the ear is a reference for the head as well. So I adjust the head accordingly, because once I put the ear in, I realized the head was too big. So just building up the shadows, and now I'm bringing the shadow over the ear, because the shadow doesn't really stop where the ear is, it just goes. Shadows don't care, they just go everywhere. Doing that cross-hatching, layering, building up the darks slowly. The shadows on the edge of the lip are important, like on the edge of the nose or the edge of the eye, just to make it dissolve a little bit into the skin so it doesn't look like it's just stuck on, that it feels like it belongs in the flesh of the face. And then just having not too much definition of the lips. Mostly it's shadow with a little bit of definition, and it's the shadow of the lips then dissolves into the shadow of the face. So the lips are partially defined, because when you're looking at a picture, a lot of this information is because we know what things look like, or it suggests something that we already know. So we don't have to put too much in. If you put too much definition, describe something too much in a drawing, it tends to look a little dead, a little stiff. So I like to have it just suggested. So I put the nose in. As the nose is getting darker, as the shadow is getting darker, then my other shadows that I've got tend to look a little lighter. So I've got to adjust everything all at once. So so whatever I do on one part of the drawing affects things that are going on in the rest of the drawing. So I've got to keep going back and forth between everything, keep an eye on everything. And then just the hair, the way I'm doing it is I'm having it grow out of the shadows. So hair can become the focal point because there's so many, so many little hairs, and you tend to overdraw the hairs sometimes, and then they become too obvious, too in focus, too much detail, and it takes the attention away from the actual focal point, which is the face in this case. So I want the hair to be there. I want it to seem as though we're just seeing it in our peripheral vision. So we're looking at the face, we're looking probably particularly at the eyes, and then everything else around that should have a sense of being slightly out of focus, just like would happen if we did look at something in reality. So I want the hair definitely to be there, but it's growing out of the shadows. It's not being too defined, so it's like the way I build up the shadows, so starting with light and then getting slowly darker and darker with layers. That's what I'm doing with the hair as well. So I'm putting a little bit of the suggestion of the hair in, and then assessing everything in relation to everything else, or assessing the hair in relation to everything else, seeing whether it needs any more definition. You know, if you look at the picture as a whole, does the hair seem not there? Does it seem too much? Do I need a little bit more? Do I need some shine? Do I need more shadow? You know, so just keeping an eye on things. So I just moved a little bit to the rest of the face to take my mind off the hair, and then I looked at the hair again, which means you see it with a fresh eye, and then you can sort of see a little more clearly what it needs. And then the shadow in the head got a little darker, so I'm just making the shadow in the cheek a little darker as well.